Well, hello and welcome to our lecture for the 21st of April on Fauvism, Cubism, and Dada. And we'll continue on. We're getting into the modern period now when we're breaking into the 20th century. Some of the stuff may look a little wild to you, and especially when we get to Dada. In fact, some of the things in Dada don't seem to have changed very much from the early part of the 20th century even till now, a century later. Don't forget, there is a quiz on this and the lecture from last week, this Thursday. So here are the styles that we're dealing with. A number of styles. You know I'm going to ask a question about styles in some form or fashion on Thursday. So please have this printout and ready to go. So up until now, on this side of the midterm, we've seen a number of styles, some of which have manifestos, and they seem to be very politically oriented, or if it's not politics, then it's sociological orientation. We've seen how the aristocracy wanted to view life through these kind of rose-colored glasses. We saw how neoclassical artists saw the upcoming French Revolution and the bloodshed that was clear. We saw how after the revolution things were not calm at all. We saw how Courbet in the Realist Manifesto, a real scathing manifesto, wanted social realism, wanted maybe not so much an idealized or perverse view of men and women in society, but a very real one, based, by the way, on big city life. We saw fighting the realists were academic artists like Bouguereau, who wanted this idealized, sexist, femme fatale kind of images that really reflected very little from society. Then we saw how the Impressionists came upon their art partly through the new technology of tube paints, but then partly just to go out and to paint what they enjoy. So there's one thing is clear with Impressionism. The subject matter is the light itself. It's not a heaviness. There's not a psychological or a physiological thing going on here. It's just the effect of light and people enjoying themselves, the transitory, because the clouds will come or the waves will move. And so it's very transitory. Well, with the Impressionist brushstroke came a revolution, and that is, oh, you can see brushstrokes now, huh? Well, then we had artists like Van Gogh who would show you the brushstrokes and really get into the psychological aspect of the color, or artists like Seurat, in which you would see the brushstroke in terms of a kind of an organized little dot. The French term for this was pointillism, pointillism. All these nice little dots. But again, you wouldn't have had this without the French Impressionists' feeling of the brushstroke. And we ended last time then looking at Cezanne, who combines a little of that brushstroke, that's what we call it, post-impressionism, but a real interesting view here now, almost denying Renaissance perspective, flattening things and examining how something looks in three dimensions kind of at once. We'll see more of this today. And the first style we're going to look at is Fauvism. It's a French word, and it was a very pejorative word, used to describe some of the artwork I'm going to show you that was in an art show. The art critic walked around this, and the art critic for Le Figaro in Paris, and said, well, these pictures aren't done by man or by artists. They're done by wild animal. Not even the word for animal is not fauve. It's wild animal, wild beasts. And this is one painting, Matisse's Red Studio. This is at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it's about 8 feet wide. We've never seen color like this before. It still shows depth through that very careful line, but this is the artist's studio. The artist's name is Matisse, from about 1911. But the influence of with the Fauvists, the influence was not so much with Cezanne, and certainly not with Seurat, but with Van Gogh, the emotive aspects of color. This is another work uh, Matisse did. We call it Woman with a Green Stripe. It's Madame Matisse, his wife. And when it was first displayed, everyone wondered, what did Mrs. Matisse think about this? I mean, it looked like an animal to them, etc. To us, it just looks, the term we use, expressionistic. But you see, with Fauvism, first of all, you still have the brushstroke from Impressionism, but then you've got the freedom of the color. The color is still tied to the object, but just barely, you might add. So here, the background, the purple, the orange, the green, they seem as excitable and as interesting as the figure itself. And instead of being a shadow down this lady's front of her face, it's this green. Again, it produces kind of eerie effects, maybe a little like a mask or something. And my last example of Fauvism is André Derain. And this is, though he's French, he went over to England. And so this is England, the Charing Cross Bridge. And you see the brushstroke, the little dots and dashes and strokes all around. But the color is not associated with the color of the water or the color of the buildings or the color of the sky. You still see the objects themselves, but the color seems to be so totally free. This was the height of Fauvism, the freedom of color that the artist got from artists very much like Van Gogh. The next work we're going to look at is works by Picasso, Pablo Picasso, a major figure in the 20th century, and the style is called Cubism. And Cubism came with a manifesto, and the manifesto was to look at an object in its constituent parts all at once. So with Cubism, we have a style that's derived mainly from Cézanne. And this is a fairly early Cubist work, a large painting called The Ladies of Avignon, the Demoiselles d'Avignon. Avignon was an area just outside of Paris where all the prostitutes would sit in the windows or sit there and men would come, etc. And the artist lived right by the Avignon area because, number one, it was cheap, and number two, they had models if they wanted to paint. So here Picasso is painting, as you see here, these 5 women. When it was first displayed, people didn't like this at all. First of all, it doesn't look logical. It looks like they have masks on. He was accused of being a misogynist, hated women, even to the point of ignoring what they're looking at here. A still life in the center. You still pick out the objects, but look at the face of the lady on the left, right? She's facing to the right, but her eye looks straight out at us, very much like an Egyptian, or the breasts of the one in the middle. One's profile, one's kind of 3/4 or frontal facing. And we can't even figure out the 2 figures on the right, the detail of that. And this indicates Picasso was looking around and visited the new Museum of Ethnographic Art in Paris, African masks, and you see that squarish shape there. Well, it's a square, it's an object, but it's in the place of where her breast might be. So we're seeing around and in and up, and we're not exactly sure what we're seeing. This is the beginning of this movement we would call abstract art. So it's not tied to veracity or realism as the artist sees, but there's still objects there as you see it. Well, this Cubism was nothing compared to his major form of Cubism that we see in 1910 and 1911. A fairly small picture. It's about 2.5 feet wide, 3 feet high, 3.5 feet high, called Ma Jolie. And that was kind of his pet name for his girlfriend at the time. And it's done in monochrome. So monochrome means really without color. So you see how he's distancing himself from Matisse or from Van Gogh. But instead, he's associating himself much more with Cézanne and those post-impressionists. So you look at this and say, well, I don't have a clue what's going on here. There's nothing that resembles anything except, wait a minute. Well, I guess you could say there's that kind of triangle at the bottom left above the Ma Jolie. Oh, by the way, this is the first time we've seen words as artwork in a picture itself, too. From here on in, Picasso does that freedom. So it's almost like we're looking at a person through a prism. And then, well, you see the horizontal white kind of at the bottom above Ma Jolie. That's an elbow and a forearm, and maybe that's an arm going up. We're not quite sure. In fact, we look straight up and we might even see a smile or a face. Got a detail of this. Here on the right-hand side, it looks like panpipes or maybe part of a guitar with an open area, even a mouth and some curves in the middle that could be a hand. So we're not exactly sure, but it's like this doesn't resemble anything we've ever seen before, except it sort of still resembles reality. So in Cubism, the parts are being kind of, if you will, examined in constituent abstract parts, and we see them all at once as if we're around. I mean, how can you see music when you think about it? I mean, you don't. You can see a musical instrument, but you sense music. So you're sensing this. Well, this is getting a little weird here. Picasso continues and he solidifies his work up. This is three musicians at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. It's about 7 feet wide, a fairly large picture showing three musicians kind of sitting down, dressed up in traditional kind of clown and harlequin costumes. So we get a sense almost of childlike quality in this, don't we? And yet we still make out what's happening. There's music being held there, the guitar, the flute, or some sort of wind instrument on the left-hand side. So we see the objects. As abstract as it might seem, the objects never disappear. Well, Picasso was asked to do a painting for a Spanish pavilion for a World's Fair, and he did this painting. This painting, which is about 30, as I remember, about 36 feet long. It's black and white, or more to the point, grisaille, very gray. And it's based upon a photograph that Picasso and others saw in the newspaper. It's called Guernica. Guernica was a very small town in the Basque region of Spain, that's north and west. And it was a town that the then General Francisco Franco, Spanish general, then gave the coordinates to the Germans, to the Nazis, and it's the first example we have of the Nazis coming in, or any armed warfare, and strafing the town and blowing everything up. I mean, no concern for where the military was or where a hospital was. Everything was simply blown up. And this was his response, clearly an anti-war response here. You see on the left-hand side a mother holding a dead child, the image of the bull and the horse, traditional in Spanish art. In the middle, kind of a figure rushes in this cubist way that Picasso has of showing with a light to see what's going on. And we see bits and pieces of dead people. On the right-hand side, a woman is screaming in agony. She's on fire. There's fire all around there. Here's a picture of what happened to Guernica. So it's an artwork of political dimensions. Here's a group that not too long ago I took to Spain. Just gives you an idea of the huge dimensions of this artwork. But Cubist too. So it may be very abstract to you, and yet it still is very recognizable. Here you see the figures. In this case, the distorted bodies work really well with this cubism, where we get the message. These little art marks, these vertical marks you see there, kind of resemble the gray that you would see in a newspaper. And we'll just move right over. There's the woman on the right-hand side. Well, the last style I'm going to show you is probably the most confusing one. It's called Dada. And like most art styles of the 20th century, and there are loads of them, though we only cover a few in this class, the art style starts with literary, with poets and writers, and then it gets co-opted by visual artists. And I'm only going to show you works by one artist. His name is Marcel Duchamp. And you'll see the problem immediately, because we have seen now how Impressionism has influenced art so much. But now we're looking at art just after, during and after the First World War. And the artist who kind of encapsulates it is an artist whose name is Marcel Duchamp. And you're looking at something he called The Fountain from 1918. See, here's the thing. Logic and order caused the First World War. During the First World War, there were 17 million people killed. Oh, and incidentally, at the end of the war, was the so-called Spanish flu, the influenza, and that killed at least 20 million more. So logic and order brought this huge decimation of human beings. So a group of artists, visual artists, also said then, well, if that's what logic and order brings, what about illogic or disorder? I mean, how bad could that be? And then you have Marcel Duchamp. So Duchamp did what you would assume here. He went to a plumbing shop, bought a men's urinal, put it upside down, wrote on it Armut, and dated it 1917. He exhibited this in a show in 1918. The show took it down and put it in the back room, and Duchamp used that to write about and to talk about it. A very controversial work. See, here's the thing. It's not only because it's a urinal, but what did Duchamp do to make this his artwork? Well, he would say he chose it. Just choosing it makes it art. He also, of course, put it on a pedestal. So now we have to look at it as art. I mean, we can talk about curves there, can't we? And designs, and triangles, and whatever. Duchamp decided to play around with the artist's name, and he never, it's not that he never, but rarely then used his own name. Here, he poses a picture, Rose Salavi. And here, he is dressing up as a woman, and kind of a flapper of the time there. But why would he spell the name so strange? Well, in French, arroser means to water. And that's not Salavi, it's C'est la vie. So in a way, Rose Salavi, basically Rose C'est la vie means piss on it, that's life. So he's making fun of the art world too. At one point, he simply decided, I'm going to finish, I finished making artwork and I'm just going to sit around and play chess. So this was an exhibit of his work at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. He hired a nude model to play chess with him while the exhibit was going on. You're dealing with an artist here who says that the idea is more important than the thing itself. In the beginning of the class, I showed you this. This is a postcard he bought from the Louvre of the Mona Lisa and made the most famous woman a man by doing a mustache and a goatee. And then he signed it LHOOQ, which if acrostic, if you pronounce it in French, LHOOQ means the lady's got a hot, bottom, if you will. So the problem with these, of course, becomes one of a question of originality. I mean, if this postcard is art, just because he picked it out and scribbled on it, then couldn't I do that? And if I do that, is that not art? By the way, if it isn't, why isn't it? So all of a sudden, art's taken now a huge philosophical turn. And it seemed like the art world was ready and willing to examine this uh, because of the nature of the war and what they did. Here's another work of his called Fresh Widow. What it is a French window. It's a real French window. Only instead of glass, he put black leather there. Actually, if you see it at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, you'll see it's cracked. The leather has cracked over the years. And he signs it Rose Salavi. Okay, it's a French window, but it sounds like fresh widow, and a widow wears black. And so there's almost a point at which you don't have to look at his art. It becomes philosophical. How original is it then? I mean, these are questions, is it? Not answers, but questions that he poses. Why, I could tell you of like a stool, just a regular wooden stool that has a bicycle wheel drilled into it. Now you're imagining it. Now you don't even have to see the work. But here's the work, called Inverted Bicycle Wheel. And in this, all of a sudden, we can't use the stool, we can't use the bicycle wheel to repair our bike or to ride in it. So it becomes a work of art. Dada, when the illogical becomes logical. Among other things, Duchamp had bad teeth, and when he went to New York, he had his teeth worked on, and he didn't have money, so he created a fake check and gave it to Daniel Zank, who was the dentist. Look at the bank there, the Teeth and Loan Trust Company. Okay, it's a fake. By the way, this check was sold for over $200,000 later. Do you have to see the work? Well, no, Duchamp said. It's the question of originality. So what Duchamp did is, while he was in Paris, he went to a pharmacist's shop and bought some sort of a glass container of some sort, and had the pharmacist melt the ends together. So inside it, and you can see the title of it, it's called Paris Air. So what are you looking at? You're looking at air from Paris that's trapped in there, and then brought it to the United States and sold it. It's the idea. Now, you may say this is just preposterous, but don't forget, men were out there in the fields, we've gotten used to this, unfortunately, now, that I would fire my rifle at you because I wear a green uniform and you wear a blue uniform. Now, I don't know you at all. I have nothing, there's no reason that I should hate you, but we're wearing different uniforms. How logical is that? So that whole question of logic becomes an issue. And that's where we'll stop today. But that sense of logic continues to the next style that we will see next time, called Surrealism. Thank you very much, and study up and get ready for your exam on Thursday.